I stepped into my mom's house at exactly 9 a.m., just like she told me. I was carrying a gift basket and a bottle of red wine I'd set aside all week. Snow still clung to my collar, but inside the air was warm and lively, or so I thought, until every eye in the living room went silent, like a stranger had just walked in. The Christmas tree sparkled with lights, surrounded by shredded wrapping paper and opened boxes. On the kitchen counter, breakfast plates had gone cold and a few glasses still held a bit of orange juice. Laughter echoed faintly from another room, but only one person ran up to greet me. "Uncle Ryan, look, I got a remote control plane!" Ethan, my 8-year-old nephew, threw his arms around my leg, eyes full of excitement. I smiled, bent down, and ruffled his hair. "That's awesome. Looks like a next-gen fighter jet." Before Ethan could respond, a cold voice cut through. "Don't bother your uncle, kid. Ryan's too busy circling the globe with his laptop. Probably doesn't have time for toy planes." I looked up. It was Mason, my brother, arms crossed, half smiling with that smug edge he never lost. His wife, Nicole, didn't even lift her eyes from her phone. "Oh, you made it. Thought you forgot where this house was." I set the gift basket down by the fireplace and nodded to Mom. She walked over and gave me a hug, but it was loose and quick, like she was afraid someone would see. No one said a word about me arriving on time. No warm greetings, no one waiting. They had all gathered hours earlier, opened presents, had breakfast, and made sure there was nothing left for me to join. Mom had clearly told me 9 o'clock, but someone had decided I wasn't worth waiting for. At lunch, instead of Dad's traditional Christmas roast, we had a bland ham. I took the only empty seat beside Ethan. Nicole looked up, lips curling slightly. "Ryan, got anyone special this year, or still flying solo like always?" The question sliced through the air like a knife. I smiled calmly. "My work gives me meaningful experiences. I'm good." Mason raised an eyebrow. "To me, that just sounds like existing, not living. No wife, no kids, no one waiting at home, so what's the point?" Silence. 1 second. 2. Then the clink of a spoon in a bowl. No one disagreed. Not even Mom. I glanced at her. She was staring down at her hands, pretending not to hear. Nicole set her water glass down, her voice syrupy sweet but biting. "You really should think about settling down, Ryan. Ethan needs cousins to play with, not an uncle who drifts in like a ghost once a year." I gripped my fork tighter, jaw clenched. Those words weren't new, but today, in the house I grew up in, without the man who used to shield me at the head of the table, it felt like every mask had fallen away. Mason leaned in, elbows on the table. "You've got no ties. We've got kids, a mortgage, responsibilities. You think you're free, but really you're just a hollow space drifting through life." Ethan looked up at me, his eyes wide and uneasy. I rested a hand on his shoulder and tried to smile. Not for them. For me. I nodded, lifted my head, and said each word clearly. "Thanks for lunch, but I think I'll go." Nicole scoffed. "Running away again. How typical." I didn't answer. The door closed behind me with a quiet thud. No one called after me. Only the cold wind slipped through my collar and the snow cracked beneath my boots. My mom used to say, "Family is the place you can always come home to," but maybe not every family lives up to that. I drove back to my Brooklyn apartment in silence. No radio, no podcast. Streetlights smeared the windshield with color, but my mind was spinning from everything that had just been said. Mason's words echoed, "You're just a hollow space." Part of me wanted to forget all of it, like I'd done before, but something about this time wouldn't let me look away. That night, I opened my laptop, skimmed through work emails, then pulled up the message Mom sent back in November. "Remember, 9 a.m. sharp on Christmas. I want everyone there." Still there. Simple and clear. Proof I hadn't been late. They started early not by accident, but by design. They wanted me out. One message from Mason stood out, sent 2 weeks before. "We need to talk about Dad and the estate. Soon." I'd ignored it, figured he just wanted another lecture about settling down. I called Dad's old lawyer, Carter Evans, a careful man in his 60s. I met him 3 years ago when Dad finalized his will. The phone rang 3 times before I heard his voice. Hello? This is Ryan, Frank Dawson's son. I've been expecting your call, he replied, like he knew it was only a matter of time. The next day, I was in his office, 10th floor of a historic midtown building. The room smelled like oak and old paper. A warm desk lamp lit a thick stack of folders. He handed me a packet, 5 loan agreements, all bearing my signature. I froze. I never signed these. The forgeries are sloppy, Evans said, pointing at the signatures, but valid unless challenged. Your father placed all assets in a private trust to prevent disputes. Your portion hasn't been released yet. So who? Mason and Nicole leveraged your mother's authority to take out a loan against the trust. Said they'd repay it after selling the old house. But he opened another folder. That house hasn't sold, and the amount they've borrowed exceeds expectations. How much? Over $160,000. I stood, backing away from the chair. That stabbing feeling wasn't metaphorical anymore. They hadn't just mocked me for not having a real life. They'd decided my life wasn't worth inheriting anything from our father. I grabbed the documents, thanked Mr. Evans, and left. While waiting for the elevator, my phone lit up with a message from Mom. Ryan, don't be upset. There's an explanation. We're family, remember? Family? I looked at the hallway mirror, my reflection blurred by the frosted glass, but in my eyes now there was no more confusion, no more silent endurance, only a quiet resolve. That night, I sat in my living room with the documents spread out like wildfire under a soft desk lamp. I stopped on one page, the first fake signature. My eyes froze on a line. Used for Ethan's tuition, August. Ethan, the only one who ran to hug me, smiling, proudly showing off a toy plane, the only light in a house shrouded in shadows. I exhaled. This couldn't continue. Not because of the money, but because Dad believed I'd do the right thing. I picked up the phone, called Mom back. She answered after one ring. You knew, didn't you? I asked quietly. You don't understand, Ryan. Things have been really difficult. Nicole lost her job, and Mason's in debt with taxes. They needed money, and Ethan needed private school. I just thought, then since I don't have a wife or kids or a future, it wouldn't matter? That's not what I meant. I cut her off. Then explain to me how someone with supposedly nothing of value gets his signature forged 5 times and no one says a word. She stayed silent. I heard her throat tighten, but I didn't soften like I used to. I ended the call with a clear sentence. Tomorrow I'm going back to Mr. Evans's office. I want to see everything that's happened. Mom, Mason, anyone involved. I need the truth. I hung up. Looking around my small apartment, the one I'd built for myself, brick by brick. Freedom, independence, and now betrayal from those who share my blood. The next morning, when I returned to Mom's house as planned, the air inside smelled different. Not cinnamon or anything warm like during the holidays, but like tension left too long, thick with unspoken truths. Mom met me at the door with evasive eyes, telling me Mason and Nicole were also there because we need to talk as a family. I didn't respond. I just walked straight into the living room, where Mason sat with his legs crossed on Dad's old armchair, holding a coffee like the house was his. Nicole sat beside him, made up like she was heading into a board meeting. Mom hovered near the kitchen door, wiping glasses as if to avoid looking at me. Finally showed up, Mason said, half accusing, half sarcastic. We need to be clear, this can't stay in the dark forever. I sat down, opened my folder, and laid out the papers one by one on the table. Each fake signed contract, every bank document, and Mr. Evans's legal statement. Nicole gave a tight smile while Mason barely masked his irritation. You investigated your own family like some outsider over a few numbers? What do you think that proves? I don't need to prove anything, I replied, eyes on the files. Everything's here. What I need is for someone to admit it. Mason scoffed. You've got no wife, no kids, no one depends on you. That money just sits there while Ethan needs school, the house is under renovation, and Mom needs help. So What's the point of you keeping it? So you can travel some more? Nicole jumped in, syrupy voice smooth as ever. Mason didn't mean to offend. We just think maybe it's time you learned what responsibility actually means. I looked at Mom. She said nothing, lips pressed tight. She wasn't surprised. She'd known all along. To everything I built, everything I saved on my own, it no longer belongs to me because I don't live how you think I should, I said, each word cold and sharp. Mason slammed his hand on the table. You've always run from reality, floating around with no commitments. You think that's freedom? You're just existing, no direction, no worth. No one disagreed, not even Mom. No one said, that's too harsh. They let it sit in the room like truth, like they'd believed it for years. I stood up, but I didn't leave. I looked Mason straight in the eye. Choosing a different life doesn't make me worthless. I don't need anyone to define value for me, especially not people who spend money they didn't earn and never asked permission for. If that's your idea of responsibility, then I'm proud. I'm nothing like you. Nicole opened her mouth to reply, but Mom interrupted in a shaky voice. Ryan, they were just trying to do what's best for the family. I turned to her, letting the disappointment show fully for the first time. And you, Mom? Who were you protecting when you let them forge my signature? When you watched them take what Dad left me and said nothing? She bowed her head. No defense. Just trembling hands and a teacup rattling against the saucer. I gathered the documents, voice steady but final. I'm not going to court, yet. But I'll be working directly with Mr. Evans to reestablish control. My share, no one touches it again. As I turned toward the door, Mason muttered something about me being ungrateful, about how I didn't understand family. I didn't care anymore. At the door, I glanced back once. Ethan's the only one in this house who hasn't tried to hide behind a fake idea of family. I hope he doesn't get pulled into the same hypocrisy you're preaching. I shut the door softly. On the snowy steps, Ethan's small bike leaned against the wall, its tires still caked with dried mud. Mr. Evans's office was unusually quiet that morning. Outside, snow fell gently against the tall windows overlooking Lexington Avenue. He invited me to sit across from him, a thick stack of files open between us, marked with red sticky notes. Ryan, your father left behind more than you know, he began, voice low and weighted. Frank didn't just prepare a will. He saw something coming. I nodded silently. After what I'd just been through with Mom, Mason, and Nicole, I no longer felt surprised easily. But his next words stopped me cold. Your signature was forged on at least 6 loan documents. They withdrew a total of $274,000 from the trust Frank set up specifically for you, all within the past 11 months. I couldn't speak, even my breathing slowed. He slid the folder toward me. Bank statements, wire transfers, clumsy forgeries, each one stamped and filed. These signatures are obviously questionable, but the bank didn't flag them since the paperwork was submitted by your mother, co-manager of the estate during Frank's hospitalization. I stared at the numbers, the purpose lines. Ethan's fall tuition, basement renovation, Mason's house. No permission, no notice, just silent theft, as if my inheritance was public funding. Frank amended the will 2 weeks before he passed, Evans continued, his voice dropping. Mason had come to see me alone. He asked to move your entire share into a joint family account under his control. My father, was he still fully aware? Absolutely. He rejected it instantly. That's when he handed full oversight of your inheritance to me, until the conditions for release were met. I flipped to the final page. The updated will spelled it out clearly. Any unauthorized withdrawals must be fully repaid before any inheritance is granted. The sole overseer, Ryan Dawson. I looked up. You're saying my father knew this was coming? Well, he didn't guess. He saw signs. Last year, when Nicole asked to temporarily borrow funds to repair the roof, Frank said no. She didn't like that, but didn't push, until his health declined. Every vague remark from Mom, every time Mason avoided discussing Dad's assets, every glance like I didn't belong, all clicked into place. I need to know how they used the rest of the money, I said. Mr. Evans nodded, pulling open a drawer. You'll want this. He handed me an aged, leather-bound notebook. On the first page was my father's handwriting. Unapproved expenses. If I'm gone, Ryan will know what to do. I flipped through it. Every entry detailed the date, amount, recipient, and reason. Mason had spent nearly $40,000 on a failed app startup. Nicole burned through more than $60,000 on luxury furniture and a month-long marriage retreat in Europe. The bulk of it, Ethan's tuition, was the only part I couldn't be angry about. I'll handle this by the book, I said, voice low but steady. No compromises, no cover-ups. Frank trusted you, Ryan. Don't let him down. I stood, grabbed the folder, and on the drive home I pulled over at a small cafe on Green Street, took out my notebook and mapped out everything. Step by step, name by name, every asset that could be recovered. They thought I was invisible, an afterthought they'd soon realize. No one builds a castle on lies without watching it collapse. That afternoon, as I sat once again in Mr. Evans's office to finalize the legal confirmation of my role as a state supervisor per the amended will, he quietly slid a thin, sealed envelope across the desk. My name, Ryan, was handwritten on the front. I held on to this per your father's instructions, he said slowly. You were only to open it once everything became clear. I held the envelope with both hands, heart tightening for reasons I couldn't quite name. My father, Frank Dawson, disciplined like a soldier, private to the bone, had never written me anything besides sticky notes on the fridge. Yet now, when he was gone, he left behind something weightier than words. I sat down, used a letter opener to carefully slice the seal. Inside were 2 handwritten pages, the slanted, steady script unmistakably his. I read slowly, each line carving itself into memory. Ryan, if you're reading this, then you already know. I'm sorry I couldn't say it to your face. I didn't want to add more weight to your shoulders as my health declined, but I knew if anyone could handle this with clarity and fairness, it was you. I saw what Mason and Nicole were doing. I stayed quiet not out of fear, but because I needed time to fix what I could without shattering what little was left of this family. I revised the will, created the trust, and gave you full oversight for that reason. You'll be called selfish, cruel, cold, but remember, mercy doesn't mean letting people exploit you. They'll try to guilt you with tears, pleas, even the child they brought into this. Don't get pulled into their game. Don't confuse responsibility with atonement. You're the only one here who truly understands the value of money earned through honest work. I trust you'll know when to be firm and when to forgive. But above all, hold on to the truth. Don't let them twist it again. Signed, Dad. I folded the letter, placed it on the desk, my fingers gripping the paper's edge. No fluff, no hollow praise, just truth, just like he always was, brief, precise, and heavy enough to shake everything. I looked up at Mr. Evans. Shall we begin? He nodded. As the named supervisor, you have full authority to request financial reports, freeze assets, and set repayment plans per the terms of the will. I've already drafted the necessary documents. Within hours, I signed a stack of legal orders, freezing the remaining funds in my mother's account, halting any estate disbursement to Mason and Nicole, and requesting a detailed 12-month audit. Mr. Evans issued formal notices to all parties. From now on, no financial action related to the estate would proceed without my signed approval. That evening, as I stepped into my apartment, the phone rang. Not a surprise. It was Mom. Ryan, what are you doing? Why are the accounts frozen? I haven't touched anything else. I'm following Dad's will. Nothing more, nothing less, I replied curtly. But Mason, he needs to pay Ethan's tuition next week. They're going to expel him. Do you really want this family to fall apart? I froze at the mention of Ethan. Her trembling voice hit me square in the chest. But Dad's words still echoed, about emotional manipulation cloaked in good intentions. Ethan will be supported, I said calmly. I'll create a private fund just for him, but Mason and Nicole will touch a cent of it. If they want their inheritance, they'll repay every penny they took. Mom went quiet for a long time. You're punishing the whole family. No, I'm fixing what they broke. I hung up before she could reply. The amber light of my apartment reflected off the wooden desk where Dad's letter now rested. Beneath it lay the files I'd prepared for the accountant, beginning a full audit going back 5 years. My family always said I didn't understand responsibility. But maybe they were the ones who needed a refresher course. That afternoon, I returned to the old house where Dad used to live, where Mom stayed after he passed. The place was empty, as if they'd known I'd come and chose not to face me. I still had my key from last year. I hadn't used it in months. Everything looked just as I remembered: yellowing walls, the scent of old wood, and a hint of peppermint from the candles Mom used to light every weekend. But this time, I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was looking for the last piece Dad hinted at in his letter. Something I'd need if it ever went too far. I stepped into the garage where no one had touched a thing since Dad died. Every tool was still perfectly arranged, like he could walk in any minute. I knelt down, moved aside old paint cans and dusty boxes until I uncovered a tarp in the far corner. Beneath it, a small safe, lightly coated in dust. My heart picked up pace. The code? I stared at the dials, then tried my birthday, 0805. A soft click. The door swung open slowly. No money inside. Just 3 items: a thick folder, a sealed envelope, and 2 black USB drives. I took them all, drove straight home. That night, I opened the documents. The first page read in Dad's handwriting: Loan ledger for Mason and Nicole. Started in 2016. I flipped through. Each column tracked amounts Dad lent them, reasons, repayment status. Red ink notes stood out: unpaid, reborrowed, without notice. At the bottom, over $312,000 withdrawn from Dad's personal accounts, without any legal agreement. I plugged in the first USB. Inside were audio files, all date labeled. I clicked on one. Frank, you need to understand. If your son doesn't have a family, handing him the estate is reckless. He's a nomad. No home, no kids, no stability. Let me manage it instead. Mason's voice, clear. In the recording, he was trying to convince Dad to transfer the estate to him, arguing I lacked financial competence. Yet the numbers said otherwise. His debt was massive. The second USB had screenshots, emails and messages between Mason and a bank officer who overlooked the signature issue. Even forged documents I'd never seen. One claiming I had long-term psychological instability affecting financial judgment. A blatant, calculated lie. The final envelope read, "For Ryan, if things go too far." I tore it open. Dad's handwriting chilled me. If you're reading this, it's gone beyond repair. You have all the proof. This USB holds it all. Forged paperwork, secret attempts to get your mother to shift power of attorney. Mason used to be a good kid, but pressure, greed, and Nicole dragged him under. Dad didn't leave what he had to you just because you were the only son living far away. He left it because you were the only one who never took anything without asking. Now, if needed, you can use all of this evidence to set things right. But I hope you do it not for revenge, but to preserve the last right thing in this family. Signed, Dad. I folded the letter and sat still. For years, I stayed silent, believing that family, even if flawed, was a place for forgiveness. But what I was holding wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate betrayal. I opened my laptop, created a new folder titled Rebuilding the Family No Compromise. Every document, audio file, and screenshot was backed up and encrypted. Tomorrow morning, I'd meet with Mr. Evans again. There was no reason to delay. Mason wanted to claim everything with fancy words, but the truth didn't need decoration. It just needed daylight. And I'd be the one to bring it forward. Not because I was the wandering bachelor's son they saw me as, but because they'd made me the last one left to uphold justice in this house. I knew something was off the moment I saw Mason's silver SUV already parked in Mom's driveway, well before the agreed time. The air inside the living room felt colder than a late winter morning. The sofa had been arranged into a semicircle, like it was set for a board meeting. Not only were Mason and Nicole there, but also Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother, Aunt Sandra, and a sharply dressed man I didn't recognize. Ryan, Mason stood up with a fake air of dignity. Good, you're here. We need to have a real family conversation. I didn't sit. My eyes scanned the table, documents laid out neatly with a clipped stack of papers. The man I didn't know spoke with a polished tone. I'm Daniel Gordon, financial advisor. The family asked me to help restructure the estate since the current situation is clearly harming relationships. Nicole followed. We don't want legal trouble, but we also can't sit back while Ryan locks down every fund like he's the judge. Mason opened the folder and slid it toward me. This is a reasonable proposal. You can keep your oversight, but the assets go into a shared fund for family use. You can't keep everything while we're struggling. I stepped forward, pulled a thicker folder from my jacket pocket. Before you start preaching, we need to clear a few things up. I opened the first page and placed it on the table. This is documentation on the rental property on Milton Street. According to the will, Dad left it to Mom for full use, not to be mortgaged. But 8 months ago, Mason secretly used an emergency hospital power of attorney to mortgage it. Loan amount, $220,000. Borrower, Mason Dawson. Mom sat frozen in the armchair, eyes locked on the papers, lips trembling. What? That house? It was your father's retirement plan. Nicole interjected. It was a temporary loan. We had a plan to pay it off. I looked her dead in the eye. What plan? The failed app? The imported furniture? Or the French vacation labeled as a business expense? Mason started to lose his cool. What gives you the right to judge? I'm protecting family assets. You just drift around, dodging real responsibility. No one lives like that and calls it living. I pulled out a printed credit card statement under Mom's name. And this is for 3 credit cards opened under Mom's identity without her knowledge. Latest transaction, an 85-inch TV from a luxury showroom. Want the tracking number too? Enough. Mom shot up from her chair. Mason, is this true? He went silent, eyes darting. Nicole turned away, gripping her dress. I wasn't done. And here's the bank report confirming 6 forged signatures on withdrawals from my trust, all verified internally with IP addresses traced to your home. No one spoke. Only the ticking clock filled the room like a countdown. Then from the staircase came a small voice. Dad said no one would find out if I stayed quiet. Everyone turned. Ethan, my one nephew who still had a conscience, stood on the stairs, phone in hand. Nicole panicked. Ethan, go back downstairs. This isn't for you. The boy looked at me, then the room. I recorded it, since Christmas. Even when Dad told Mom, if Ryan doesn't sign, just forge it. He won't make a fuss. Mason lunged. Ethan, don't you dare. I stepped between them. Don't touch him. Aunt Sandra folded her hands. Dear God. Uncle Robert shook his head and pulled out his phone. I think it's time to involve a real lawyer. Ethan came down, placed the phone on the table. If Mom and Dad keep lying, I'll send this to the school. They need to know why my tuition wasn't paid. The room collapsed into silence. Every ounce of self-righteousness had evaporated. I opened my laptop, plugged in Dad's USB, and handed it to Daniel, the financial advisor. These are Dad's recordings from the last 3 years, plus his notebook, plus documents. If you're serious about handling this like a family, start with the truth. Daniel glanced at Mason, then back at me. I'll review them right away, and if what you're saying is accurate, I can't represent them anymore. Mom lowered her head into her hands, speechless. Ethan quietly came to my side, resting his head against my arm. 3 days after that confrontation, I got an urgent call from Mr. Evans at 6 a.m. Mason just tried to transfer the entire balance of Doris Dawson's account into a personal account in his name at another bank, he said quickly. Thankfully, our alert system caught it in time. The transaction was denied and the account is now frozen for investigation. I hung up, opened my laptop, and logged into the financial monitoring dashboard Mr. Evans and I had set up the previous week. A red alert blinked on screen. Unauthorized transfer attempt $11844. I sent a report to the bank's legal counsel attaching one of Dad's recordings from the USB. His voice was weak, but deliberate. Mason came by yesterday while I was getting fluids. He laid a paper on the table, told me to sign, and everything would be fine. I saw the words, full financial power of attorney. I refused. He got angry. Said I didn't care about the family. I hit record when he came back, just in case things went too far. I forwarded the clip to the attorney representing Mom. Meanwhile, I called Ethan, this time to make sure he was okay. His voice was a bit tired but firm. I sent the recording to the school board, Ethan said. The principal called Mom this morning, but I wouldn't talk without a lawyer. You did the right thing, I said, stunned by how quickly he was growing up. Later that day, Ethan's school announced he'd been granted an emergency scholarship for the upcoming term. They also launched an internal investigation into donations Mason and Nicole had previously listed as charitable sponsorships. One of the teachers, an old friend of my father's, confirmed those donations never existed in the system. Word spread quickly. By early the next week, Nicole's social circles in the local business community began excluding her from events. One member who had once partnered with her on an investment fund sent a letter demanding the return of over $80,000 Nicole had pitched as a joint contribution last year. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just one thing moving in the right direction. The truth finally had a voice of its own. A day later, I received a video from someone at Mason's firm. It was security footage capturing the moment two government agents walked into his office with a notice of investigation for misappropriation of assets and document forgery. Mason was ordered to turn over all related files within 7 days. The image of him collapsing into a chair, face buried in his hands, needed no narration. That evening, Nicole called me. "Ryan, please, hear me out." Her voice trembled, a far cry from her usual sharpness. "We were wrong, I know that, but Ethan, he needs a home, a real family. I'm scared of losing everything." I didn't answer right away. Part of me understood that fear, but another part remembered Dad's words. Compassion does not mean enabling. They've used family as a shield for far too long. "I'm not going to send you to jail," I said slowly, "but I'm done protecting you. From now on, everything goes by the book. Ethan will be taken care of. As for you, you'll be held accountable." Nicole cried quietly. No begging, no arguing, just a woman realizing her mask had fallen and there was no one left to defend her. The next morning, Mr. Evans and I filed a petition with the local probate court to freeze Mason and Nicole's assets during the investigation. The request was granted within 4 hours. We also began formal recovery of all unauthorized trust withdrawals, plus penalties. The town's online forum started buzzing. Mason and Nicole's names were removed from the board of a major nonprofit. Their weekly tennis club issued a letter terminating their membership for serious ethical violations. The home they flaunted every holiday season went up for sale in a rush, but I had already filed a legal motion to freeze it pending asset source investigation. In my living room, Ethan sat doing homework at Dad's old wooden desk. He looked up and held out a handwritten letter. "Uncle Ryan, I found another letter from Grandpa in the bookshelf. It's for me. Want to read it with me?" I nodded and sat beside him. Some legacies aren't measured in dollars, but in the integrity of one man and the courage of a child willing to speak the truth, even against his own parents. Ethan moved in with me the week after the court granted temporary guardianship. His mother didn't object. Mason had remained completely silent since his second summons to testify about forged documents during Dad's illness. On his first day in my apartment, Ethan arrived with 3 suitcases and a small backpack filled with school supplies. No teddy bears, no toys. But he had a worn leather notebook with blue ink on the cover. Journal of Mr. Dawson's son. "You can stay here as long as you want," I told him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "As long as you feel safe." He nodded, no words needed. The exhaustion in his eyes slowly faded, with each evening spent beside me, reading Grandpa's letters or cooking together instead of eating takeout. A week later, I met with Mom to discuss the Timberline Hill property, Dad's old triplex. She was packing to move closer to Aunt Sandra. "I'm thinking of buying that property," I said directly. "Full market value, clean paperwork, but I want to convert it into affordable housing for retired singles." She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Your father used to say, that place shouldn't just generate income. He hoped it could be a home for people who never had a place to rest easy. I closed the purchase within 8 days. 3 houses, each unique. The first I kept as is, oak frame and all. The second got a new roof and a large sun-facing window. The last, overlooking the valley, I planned as a shared community space. Ethan took special interest in every renovation. He kept asking questions: how to fund operations, cover maintenance, make it sustainable. One night, while designing nameplates for each unit, he said softly, "I want to study finance when I go to college, but not to get rich. I want to help people not get tricked, like Grandpa." I looked at him, heart tightening, not from emotion, but from seeing trust grow in a child who once lived surrounded by deceit. "Then we'll start with your own fund," I replied. "A fund no one can touch, not even me, not even you, until you're 18. It'll be used only for education and your future financial project." The next day, I met with Mr. Evans and created the Ethan Legacy Fund. I requested permanent revocation of access from Ethan's former family and designated a 3-person independent advisory board from nonprofit groups. Each month, Ethan receives financial literacy sessions from a volunteer advisor. He learns fast. Even building a personal budget and tracking expenses in Excel, something I'd never seen from a 13-year-old. One evening, while I was checking email in my study, Ethan knocked and came in holding a stack of papers. "I drafted my first business plan," he said, placing it on my desk. "It's a model for affordable laptop rentals for students in low-income areas." I flipped through the pages. It had startup costs, revenue forecasts, risk analysis. Not perfect, but astonishing for someone barely into their teens. "Your grandpa would be proud," I said, without hiding my admiration. Ethan sat down and nodded. "I think he's still watching. Maybe he left something else we haven't found yet?" I chuckled. "With your grandpa, that's possible. But even if not, the clearest thing he left is you." The room fell quiet for a moment, no words needed. Outside the window, light snow began to fall. Spring hadn't arrived yet, but in my heart, a new chapter had truly begun. No more blame, no more shadows masked as love. Just a future that Ethan and I were now rebuilding, line by line, day by day. After everything, Ryan not only reclaimed justice for himself, but redefined the true value of family. He protected Ethan from a toxic environment and rebuilt his father's legacy with integrity and resolve. From someone once dismissed for living differently, Ryan became the moral center his family never had. His life is no longer aimless as once mocked, but a testament to rebuilding through clarity, wisdom, and a heart unclouded by resentment. What do you think about Ryan's actions and how he stood up for the truth? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more inspiring and powerful stories about family and the true meaning of connection.